The thing I love about this documentary is that it's not just some internal video that we're just showing at the convention, but it's really being shown around the country. This is a film that's being featured in a long list of film festivals in cities including Hampton, Virginia, Charlotte, San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, Birmingham, Detroit, and at the Teaneck Film Festival in Teaneck, New Jersey. So that is all worth a round of applause. I want to welcome back our guests online. Those of us here in Cleveland just finished watching the entire documentary Behind the Headlines, the NABJ Journey, and we're thrilled to welcome everyone back for the conversation. I want to bring in our special guests, our founders, at least a small group of them, Joe Davidson, Allison Davis, Joel Dreyfus, Sam Ford, and Dwayne Wickham, who's also served as, and you saw in the documentary, as NABJ president from 1987 to 1989. Let's please give a round of applause to our entire group. Pardon my back there. A lot of you guys have seen this documentary already, but I know for some of you, it's been your first time being able to watch it. Joel, let's start with you. This is your first time seeing it. Can you give us a sense of what your reflections are seeing it, and what should be the main takeaway? What do you want people to take away from this documentary?
I think it's important to understand that there was a struggle for us to get into the business. This was a segregated business when we first started. There's a mention that most newspapers had one. Most newspapers had none. Most newsrooms had no journalists of color. And there were many editors who openly said that they didn't believe that we belonged in the business. From the beginning, we had to prove our professional credentials, deliver stories that they didn't want to print or run on the news. And so there was a real sense of struggle to break into the business and to reach this number that we have today.
Sam, I want to ask you the same thing because this is the first time you have seen it. We're at the 50th anniversary of NABJ. What is it like being in this room, getting that reaction? And same question, what do you want people to take away from this documentary?
Well, I think it's camaraderie. That's one of the things, again, I came here at like 22 years old. I met a lot of people. I just saw Linda Lockhart on there. She was just a sweet lady. She left us this year. You form friendships. So my son went to Washington University in St. Louis. I took him to Linda's house. I said, I want you to meet my son. Linda, take care of him. He's here in St. Louis. And of course, my son joined their church, babysit their son. But these are the kinds of friendships that we made here in this organization. So looking at a lot of this, it just kind of brought back great memories.
I'm going to change orders a little bit. Allison, you have been part of getting this documentary out here. So in addition to getting your reflections on this, can you give us a sense of when you're at these film festivals, when people are seeing this, possibly learning about NABJ for the very first time, what impact is it having on those people?
Well, let me first say that I'm not going to most of the film festivals for a reason. I think that this film is also the story of our local chapters. This gives our local chapters, many of them will be celebrating their 50th year next year, an opportunity to tell their own stories to their communities. And so while we're trying to have at least one founder at some of these, and we just heard last night, by the way, that we're in Nashville, we're also in Oakland, California as well. So we're very, very glad. And we've won two special awards, won the Henry Hampton Award and the Roxbury Film Festival, which I'm particularly proud of. Henry Hampton actually was a producer for Eyes on the Prize. And so for us to win that was pretty significant, and the best documentary in Virginia. I I'm going to answer, I hope I've answered that question, but I really do, I would be remiss if I didn't. I think he's in the crowd here. If I didn't call out our director, James Blue, and his team. James is a longtime member, and he's somewhere out here. James is a longtime member of NABJ, but he gets us. He is also, I have to mention that he is up for a Peabody for another piece that he's done for PBS. So James's vision, his orders were no narration, let us tell our own stories. And he did it with his crew masterfully. I think I tried to keep them a little honest as sort of the keeper of the early archives, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that this, our writer and director, James, was instrumental in this film and making this film a success.
I'm going to move to Dwayne because you were former NABJ president. You know, when we were watching that documentary, they made a point of, even at that first meeting, there was a sense of revival. There was a sense of community. Those are adjectives, those are words that I use talking about NABJ now. Talk a little bit about the growth of the organization, and is this something that, let me ask it like this, would you have done anything different in those early days, now seeing what the organization has become?
Probably a lot of things different. But listen, NABJ then and now is really the sum of its parts. We were local organizations before we were a national organization. The Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, very dynamic. The people who came out of that organization spearheaded the creation of our national group. Sam talked about Linda Lockhart Jones in St. Louis. She was a part of a group that had Gerald Boyd and Sheila Rule, who went on to the New York Times. Gerald Boyd became the editor of the New York Times. George Curry, who became the great editor of Emerge magazine, put Clarence Thomas on the cover with a handkerchief ahead. And then one time as a lawn jockey. I mean, these were great startup people who created an organization that continues today. We made we took a lot of good steps. We made a lot of mistakes. It was a learning curve. I wouldn't take any of that back. And if I have any critique of the film that's not favorable, and the film is fantastic, it didn't have enough time to tell enough of our story.
Absolutely. I want to let our audience know that as we continue this discussion, we want this to be interaction with you guys. So there are 2 microphones set up. I believe it's here, and I believe there's one in that aisle as well. So get up when you have a question, stand in line, and we'll make sure we start to incorporate some of the questions that you have. Joe, I want to ask you, you know, I think when you watch the documentary, it's so clear that the barriers that you all faced were very clear. We saw Max Robinson talk about them playing video over him as he was reading the news. Maureen Bunyan talked about her news director telling her that she wasn't black enough, whatever that means. The barriers we're facing now, that journalists in this room are facing now, have shifted. They're not as clear. You can get into your own experience at Washington Post and the mergers that we're seeing and changes in corporate leadership. With all the changes that we're seeing in this industry, how should we as journalists approach that, especially when the barriers are not as obvious as they were when you were all starting?
Well, I'm a firm believer in organizing. And, you know, a few decades ago, we used to always go around saying, organize, organize, organize. And I think in today's climate, we need that more than ever because the challenges, some of the challenges are the same, some are very different. And the corporate structure that you're talking about, the mergers, this issue with Paramount, CBS, and Skydance, and eliminating DEI. You mentioned the Post, and of course Jeff Bezos has owned that for many years. But in the last year or so, certainly since November, his policies have led to many cancellations of subscriptions, many people leaving, including me just last month. And along with the buyout, there have been many more people leaving. And the kinds of relationships that Bezos has demonstrated with Trump in order to protect his primary investment, which is Amazon, have been really very troubling to a lot of people at the Post. When you see him on the front line of Trump's inauguration, you know, Amazon donated $1 million to his inauguration. You know, there's this sense of coziness, not just a sense, but those actions kind of demonstrate a coziness that leaves many of us in journalism feeling very troubled and very uncomfortable. And so I think the way the corporate culture now is kind of encroaching upon journalism in many different ways, especially when it seems to be in service to Donald Trump as a politician to be feared, essentially, as opposed to one to be reported on. You know, it should give us all in journalism a great deal of concern, and I think organizations, journalism organizations in particular, and perhaps NABJ leading the way to some extent, are incredibly important in this environment.
I want to ask that same question of Sam. When you're seeing these barriers that you face and you're seeing that on screen, and what are the barriers that we're facing now as journalists? How do you compare those two?
Well, the one thing I can say, I retired in December of 23, and I'm glad that I'm not out there today.
Spell that out. Why are you so glad?
Well, because of people like Trump, you know? And I think that the question is the truth being told? That is a big question. And I read the Washington Post today. Trump is talking about taking over the D.C. government, talking about sending in the National Guard to replace the D.C. Police Department. This is idiotic. And you have to sit there and try to look at it in a straight face and say, on the one hand, you know, yeah, no. So I'm glad I'm not out there doing this. And, you know, one of the things, and I don't know if you all had this situation, but a number of my friends have told me the same thing. I just stopped watching TV. I'm a news reporter on television, but I just couldn't take it. You know, I said, I don't want to see this. And that's terrible to hide your head in the sand, you know, that's true. But, you know, now he's having some problems, I'm watching more.
I can't tell if we have anyone we do. Okay, can you just go to the microphone? And we'll get your question in. I'm sorry, I directed you wrong, over there.
I'm at a microphone.
Okay, there we go, thank you.
Sherry Jackson, Birmingham Association of Black Journalists, longtime member of NABJ. One of the things I take away from the film is the courage it took. You guys mentioned there were more than 44 people there, but only 44 signed. And so my question is about the courage it took then and the courage it will take now to address some of the ills in the industry and in our society as far as democracy and the role of journalism is concerned.
Allison, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I mentioned I was 22 years old, and I guess I was 22 years old and foolish. I had just actually left the Panther Party in Boston, and had gone home where my parents lived in Silver Spring, and ended up at this event. So for me, I shouldn't tell you that I was fearless, but I was. I was working at WBZ in Boston, but I was new at the job. But what could they do to me? You know, my thought was, this was where I was supposed to be at this point in my life. I had just done a bunch of revolutionary things, and I would come home and my parents would ask all the time, who are you now? And I would say, well, you know, at one point I came home and I said, I'm almost Allison 5X. And my mother said, oh, Lord. The bottom line to this story is that NABJ, I think, pretty much calmed me down, because now I understood a little bit more of what we needed to do in order to to pull this organization together. And I also understood working in these groups, whether it was the Republic of New Africa, and you don't want to know about that one, or the Panther Party, I knew that you had to have worker bees. You know, not everybody could make the speeches. Not everybody could do what I think some of us were called to do. So I think that all of that led up to my work at NABJ.
Let's get a question on this side.
Good morning. Wayne Dawkins, Professor of Research, Hampton University Scripps Howard School. And first, a quick praise. Co-founder Paul Delaney, who is not on the panel, is featured prominently in 2 new books. A History of the New York Times by Adam DeGurney, and also a book called The Evening Star that features his time at the Washington Star. Now my question, what is it going to take to get the last living founder's picture? He's Richard Rambo. He's in Detroit. We need someone to get a camera on him and get that picture and close the loop, because I have interviewed every living founder of NABJ, but we need to close that loop. He's about 85 years old. We're almost out of time.
You know, I can talk to that because I knew Richard. We were both in Detroit at the time. Well, I was in Philadelphia, but I knew him from Detroit. And I've tried to get in touch with him many times over the years. And his brother said that he doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody, not even his brother, not NABJ, not anybody. And so, believe me, we have tried, but I don't think he wants to cooperate with that. And he came to he's a founder, and he was at the founding meeting, but he never attended anything else, to my knowledge.
Let's get your question.
Thank you very much. Andrew Humphrey, Chief Meteorologist, Fox 13 Memphis, also lifetime member of NABJ, founded the Digital Journalism Task Force, also co-founder of the Weather and Climate Task Force. First off, we've said it once, and we've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being legends, for being brave pioneers. We stand on your shoulders. With that, for the short-term future and long-term future, we know that there are many challenges that are out there and many more challenges to come. When you look at today's journalism and media landscape, what kind of optimism do you have for NABJ members, especially with the tools and technology that is faster, that is cheaper, that is smaller, that gives one more independence or autonomy in performing their jobs or achieving their goals, and basically building their own New York Times, building their own Washington Post, building their own journalism and media foundation for the people. Thank you.
Joel, you want to take that?
Oh, you're pointing to me?
Sorry.
I listen.
Dwayne, I'm sorry. Dwayne,
Okay.
you want to take that?
Dare to be great. The future for black journalists is not to be found at NBC or at CNN or at any of the other mainstream traditional media organizations. We have to look beyond the curve, beyond the horizon, to figure out what the new delivery systems are and how we play a part in that. Throughout the history of this country, from Ida B. Wells and even before Ida B. Wells, to Walter White, to many of the other journalists, Carlotta Bass of California Eagle, coming forward, black journalists have stepped forward, but they have been few and far and in between. It takes courage. We've got a lot of people in this room. I don't know how many courageous people we have. Just as on December 12th, 1975, we had a lot of people attending a meeting of 800 black elected officials. That's lost to us today. People forgot why we were there. There were 800 black elected officials coming together in Washington to plot our future. And they are lost to history like the guy who spoke before Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. He gave a long, great speech. They thought he was a great orator, and we remember the Gettysburg Address. We remember what happened in the wake of that gathering of 800 black elected officials, because it took courage to do what we did. Courage is the requirement, people. You need courage. If you don't have courage, get your check and get out of the way. The future you'll be run over by what's happening now. This country has launched an assault on free speech. This country has launched an assault on democracy. And if we're not up to the fight, we are going to see very soon ushered on us the American apartheid.
Sam, I want to follow up and trying to take that a step further, because we've seen even the appearance of black journalists change when you talk about the evolution that Andrew was referencing over the past 50 years and how we appear on television, both stylistically, how we present the news. What do you make of that evolution that we've seen over the past 50 years?
Well, I don't know. One thing that struck me, particularly in Chicago and here too in Birmingham, there's a lot more of us. I mean, you know, again, we got Trump, right? But look at if you go down there and look at that convention career fair. Yeah. I was curious. I was looking. You still got even these Trump organizations like Fox News and Sinclair that I used to work for. They're there. They're still recruiting. They're DEI. I mean, I guess that's the way he puts it. So I think we're going to outlast him. Okay, and I think that the important thing is to keep going. My big interest in the NABJ when I was here, when I first came to Washington, was to have more black journalists. At that time, I was at the University of Minnesota. We had an organization called the Twin City Black Communicators. Okay, and so everything sort of kind of, you know, boiled into NABJ. Now I'm not sure, I don't really have contact with Minnesota anymore, but it's probably something like the Minnesota Association of Black Journalists or something like that. But that's it, and I think if we keep pushing, one thing is to keep pushing getting people hired. And I think that's important, the ideology and whatever, that's good too, but I think that was what was in my mind then, and it's still in my mind now, that we get people in these organizations, get people in these jobs.
Sounds like a little bit of not letting up.
Yeah.
Can we take a question from?
Yeah. My name is Jibril Diallo. I'm president and CEO of the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network, an organization devoted to strengthening the ties between Africa and the people of African descent. And I spent 40 years of my life working for the United Nations. I'd like the panel to address an issue which is indirectly addressed in the documentary. That is how, over the past 50 years, NABJ has made a meaningful, though behind-the-scenes contribution to the development of journalism in Africa. Very, very important role that NABJ has played. Each one of you, we've had a story together. I'd like you to address that. Because while the core mission of NABJ is to advocate for black journalists in the US, NABJ has also impacted cross-border operations regarding the development of journalism. Very quickly, in the area of building international solidarity, in the area of building training and mentorships of African journalists, in the area of amplifying African voices, in the area of partnership with African institutions and so on and so forth. So that this is something which we're very, very proud of, which is reverberating across the African continent and needs to be addressed. I'm very, very proud and very thankful again to the founders of this organization for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Joel, I'll let you take this, especially because you live part of your time overseas, not in Africa, but in Europe. What's your answer to that?
I think NABJ from the beginning was very conscious of the coverage of Africa. It was one of the sore points. We saw too many stories about pathology and war and unrest, and very little about people in Africa, how they lived normal lives, where progress was being made. And when we started the awards, we always had an award for reporting on Africa or for an African journalist. So we just always had a global vision of what NABJ stood for, and that's one of there were more initiatives, I think, under various presidents to have better links with African journalists. But the problem was that most of the journalism in Africa was very constrained and censored and repressed. It was dangerous to be a daring journalist in Africa. So we recognized that courage, and that's it.
Joe.
I just wanted to mention quickly that Jabril, who just asked that question, was one of the honorees by the founders. He received the Founders Award a couple of years ago because of all of his hard work in taking journalists, black journalists in particular, specifically NABJ members, on many trips over the years to the continent. And he's a regular attendee here at NABJ.
And I just want to add to that, in the 90s, I was working for the Today Show, and many of you may not know or may not remember, but the Today Show went to Africa for a week, and Jabril was very, very instrumental in helping us do what amounted to over 10 hours of programming with Brian Gumbel and either Katie or Jane or one of those. In Africa, we were based in Zimbabwe, and so if it hadn't been for Jabril and I guess to a certain extent Bryant and I, who were fighting very hard to make sure that, yeah, we went to Australia, we went to London, the Today Show, but we needed to go to Africa, and we did. And so, again, thank you, Jabril, for your efforts in helping us then.
We unfortunately just have a few minutes left. I want to get as many questions as we can from the audience, so let's get another question. If you can make it as quick as possible, and we'll make sure we do it on this.
Hello, good morning. My name is Taylor Good. I am entering into my junior year in college at Southern Methodist University, and I'm the president over our SMU ABJ chapter. And I wanted to ask you all, just looking at that documentary, how did you all maintain a sense of hope when you don't see the fruit of your work? The Bible says hope deferred makes the heart sick. How did you maintain faith that what you're doing 50 years from now was going to be the impact that you see right now?
Allison, you want to take that?
I've been lucky enough for the past few years to work in the student projects. And many of you don't know that we have 5 weeks of boot camp starting in the early spring. And hearing and listening and working with students have given me hope that if we continue to share our knowledge, if we continue to help, to be there when it's time for you to ask questions of our experiences, that we're going to be okay. So I do have that hope.
I think one other thing is when you're in the struggle, as we were in the newsrooms, we knew we were on the right side, and that's how you maintain hope, is the righteousness of your position.
Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name's Donna Stewart. My questions were actually already asked, but I just wanted to continue to say thank you to all of you. This organization means so much to me. I came to my first NABJ 25 years ago. I've worked in markets. I worked for NBC in San Diego, and I started as a part-time nights and weekend editor in Phoenix. So I did not have a lot of people that looked like me in the newsrooms that I worked in. And I'm gonna cry. I don't wanna cry. I cannot tell you what it means to be able to come to this every year. I'm retired now, and I'm still here. I'm not even working in the business anymore, but it is that important to me to be around all of these smart people that do what I do, that understand the importance of what we do, and I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Gil, can I say one
Please,
thing?
Tim.
Earlier this year, I was in Africa, in Benin, and I walked by their convention center, and I thought, before I croak, I would love if NABJ actually had a convention in Africa. You know, I know it's expensive and all that sort of stuff, but you know, maybe plan for it, you know, start saving for it, have a campaign for it. But I think it would be a wonderful thing. And I wasn't planning on being in Senegal because I couldn't get a visa to get from Benin to Ghana, because I couldn't get a visa from Togo to get across Togo to get to Ghana. So I flew to Benin, or to Senegal, so I could get into Ghana. But anyway, I flew to Senegal and I was typing on Facebook, and guess who was there? Jabril was there. Jabril said, "Sam, are you in Senegal?" And I said, "Yes." So for the next 3 days, I had lunch one day, he took me to dinner the next day, and then he drove me to his beach house the next day, and I had a wonderful time. And again, these are associations of NABJ. I just wanted to say that.
Family travels. Go ahead, please.
John McCann, I do nonprofit comms for North Carolina Black Alliance. Chuck Stone was one of my college professors, and more than anything technical that he showed me was when he peered over my shoulder one day when I was working on the story in class and said, "You could write." Now, whether I really could or not is debatable, but because he said it and because of who he was, made me believe I could. Now, he was an older man during that time, so he had this great resume, but I'm wondering for you guys as founders, when y'all were dealing with him, before he had this extensive cachet, what was it about him that allowed y'all to get in line and follow his lead?
Now, yeah, I was in Philadelphia with him, and for those early meetings where he was discussing a vision for NABJ. And I can remember we had a meeting on Broad Street, not far from City Hall, and he would say, like, the black lawyers are organized, the black doctors are organized, the black dentists are organized, black journalists need to be organized. So he had this way of breaking down things. And by the way, even then, his resume was really impressive, even in those 50 more years ago. He had this way of just basically explaining why this move was necessary. And the bylaws that we had written in Philadelphia, parts of them were incorporated into the national document that Allison had so much to do in drafting. And it's so his importance is really hard to overstate.
I think we have time for one more question.
Morning anchor for KTNV in Las Vegas. Hey, Sam. You all have seen a lot with this organization in the last 50 years. What does it need to do in the next 50 years to continue staying relevant?
I think we have to cope with the change in the industry. There's a very fundamental change. Somebody mentioned we have all this new technology. It's a lot cheaper to produce, whether it's print or at least online or television. What we haven't solved is the mass audience, reaching a mass audience. And I think that's what the evolution of journalism is going to be. Yes, we can all be NBC, at least in the quality of the product we make, but how do we distribute it to a large enough audience? And how do we create news influencers is one of the questions we have to deal with.
I think we also need a level of introspection. You know, the philosopher asked the question, what is the greatest knowledge a person can have? The answer is know thyself. Who are we as an organization today? Who are we? What is our vision for the future? How do we see ourselves getting there? Those are the questions we have to ask. We have to be very introspective. I'm telling you again, the challenges we face are not long-term, they're short-term. And we have to get ourselves together as an organization, figure out where we want to take this organization in the next decade. I'm not even going to talk about the next 50 years. How do we get through the next 10 years? It's an important question. And we have to spend some time even while we're here. You know, when you're at the bar, having a drink, take a minute to talk about how we get to this next step, how we make it. This challenge that we see in front of us is real, and they're coming after us. Seriously, they're coming after us.
Let me sneak one more in. Do you see threats in the newsroom facing black journalists today, and what can NABJ do? What should NABJ do to help this out?
Well, I think when there are threats in the newsroom, it's always helpful, and this goes back to my other statement about organizing, and on the local level, not even the chapter level, but newsroom level. I think that it's important for journalists to come together and to be aware of the threats that we are facing, and as a group, and it could be a small group in a newsroom, to collectively try to address those issues with the management, because I think there's definitely more power when we're together than when we're alone.
I want to end on positivity. What makes you most proud?
That we've survived and thrived and gone from 44 to 5,000 members. And that we've created an advocate for us in the profession.
Allison, can you take that as well?
I mean, I would agree with Joel that we've thrived, and I talk to a lot of young people, and they're enthusiastic, and they want to continue with this organization, and like you, coming through student projects, being the NABJ babies, the babies grow up, and they do amazing things. And I just want to continue to support that in ways that we as founders can support it. But I also want to make sure that folks understand the issues that we've had. And I don't think, when I don't know about the rest of the folks here, but when I speak to young folks, I always apologize. And I apologize because my dad worked for the AFL-CIO in the 60s and marched with King and then started the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission under Johnson. And he always said, I'm doing this, I'm staying away so your life will be better. And then I look at our lives now, and to some extent, they're not as great as I thought they would be, and they're certainly not as great as my dad had said. And I feel the same way about the young folks that we deal with in the student projects, that I want to work as hard as I can to make sure that your lives in the newsrooms and your lives in the stories that you tell, and that you have some context to your story so you understand what came before you in order to write better stories. So you don't have to go through what our parents have gone through, some of your grandparents have gone through, and certainly some of the stuff that we've gone through.
I just want to say, I remember in the documentary there was a point where you were all asking, how did you become founders? And I have a family member who says an association with 3 people is just 3 friends sitting on a couch complaining. And you made sure, just by your presence there at that first meeting, that that's not what NABJ was, that it turned into this, that it turned into what we celebrate every year. So thank you guys for the work that you did in founding this organization.
The person who just sat down was founder Norma Adams-Wade.
Yes.
She ended the documentary, and I think we should hear whatever it was that she was going to ask.
Oh, that's
Norma?
If we had... Oh. Sorry, I can't see.
Wait.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much. Back in my home community, I often get the question how we distinguish ourselves with the Black-owned press, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is publishers of Black-owned media. And so I was hoping some of my co-founders would just address how do we distinguish ourselves? Do we get along with them? Is there some kind of relationship? That's my question.
Just from D.C., I love Denise Rolock Barnes. She is the publisher of the Washington Informer. As far as I'm concerned, and also I see some of the reporters, we're friends. I mean, just like colleagues at other places as well. Certainly, the Black press is a friend, and just my experience is we get along great.
Well, and historically from the beginning, at our first convention in Baltimore, we gave the then Frederick Douglass Award to the publisher of the Afro. At a convention many years later, in 1985, 1986 it may have been, we gave the publisher of the City Sun in Brooklyn, New York, an award. We've invited the Black press and had many Black press people working with us in our organization. Many of us have worked for the black press. I've worked for the Afro, I've worked for Black Enterprise. Joe was a part of an effort to form a national black newspaper back in the
1980s, early 80s,
okay.
and National Leader.
National Leader.
Yeah, that was great.
So we don't distinguish ourselves, nor do we separate ourselves out from that part of the industry.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I ran into Ellie Tatum, the publisher of the Amsterdam News, and I am so proud of what she's done to that paper and how she's winning awards left and right. So, yes.
That was an important point to make for sure. I'm getting the very hard rap from our producers in the back. So I just want to thank the panel. Can we give it up for the entire panel for Joe Davis, Joe Davidson, Allison Davis, Will Dreyfus, and Dwayne Wickham. I don't know if it picked up. Sam Ford as well. And then I'm your host, Shaquille Brewster. Some quick housekeeping announcements before we all leave this room. Look for an encore presentation of that documentary, Beyond the Headlines. That will be Saturday at 11 a.m. in the Atrium Ballroom, C and F. I know we have other founders here. Can the other founders here just stand to be recognized? Thank you for being here. And as a reminder for everyone, for your safety, please download the NABJ 25 mobile app for security and emergency information throughout your stay here in Cleveland. Thank you all for being here this morning. Enjoy the rest of the convention and have a great day.